It's no secret that folks are moving to Bozeman, Montana, and it's very possible that it's quite different from where they or you might be coming from. Maybe you've read about it being one of the best places to live, or you've heard about the amazing outdoor lifestyle and all of the different recreational opportunities in the area. Maybe you've got kids that are looking to go to Montana State University, or perhaps you're looking to retire somewhere that's a smaller town lifestyle, but that still has a really vibrant downtown and lots going on. No matter what the case, there are definitely some things that you need to know before moving here to Bozeman, Montana. So with that, let's dive right in. Hey there, my name is Hallie with Life in Bozeman, Montana. This channel is all about living in and around Bozeman, all over the Gallatin Valley and beyond, from Ennis to Three Forks to Livingston to Big Sky and everywhere in between. I have a tendency in my videos to talk about the weather first, and this video is no exception. In fact, today, right now, I'm just blocks from downtown Bozeman. We saw everything this morning from sunshine and then rain and then grapple, and then we had a full-blown snowstorm. As you can see all around me here, there's plenty of snow on the ground right now. All the while, it is technically springtime here in Montana. So it is just at the end of March here, and these last few days we've seen this same exact pattern come through. We've seen just about every type of season or every type of weather all in one day. So the weather here really can make or break your decision on whether or not to be here. Winters especially can be absolutely brutal here in Southwest Montana and really all over the state. And they do tend to extend well into spring, and they tend to start a little bit early in the fall as well. All in all, we tend to see about 5 to 6 months of winter weather, and that's going to start as early as September or more likely into October, and that'll carry through until April, sometimes a little bit into May. Now, obviously, it's a really big state, and even in this area of the state, things are not going to be the same everywhere. Bozeman might see, a foot of snow, maybe the mountains see even more, 2-3 feet of snow, but then over the pass into Livingston, it might be completely dry and just really windy. So it's going to vary quite a bit, and it's really important to consider that as you're looking at where you might want to be in the area. It's also important to know that those snowstorms and cold weather really doesn't affect day-to-day life here. Work is not on hold. Most likely you'll be still expected to get to your place of employment, and school is definitely still in session. So it is definitely best to be prepared. All-wheel drive, winter tires, a little bit of patience, and a little bit of extra time go a long way. Having an emergency kit in your car is also highly recommended. It's also worth noting that the days are shorter during those cold winter months. We're far enough north that we're going to see far less sunlight. Nights are really long, and that's one reason it can get quite cold. So it's always a good idea to get outside when the sun does come out and soak up those rays so you can keep your spirits up during those shorter days. But of course, all that snow and cold makes for great wintertime activities, skiing and snowboarding and snowmobiling and so much more. Of course, Bridger Bowl and Big Sky are the two closest ski areas here, with Bridger Bowl just to the north of town, maybe 30 minutes, and about an hour south of town is Big Sky Resort with some big mountain skiing as well. Both are definitely known for having great powder days, and again, there's plenty more to do in winter as well, from just sledding down a local sled hill to snowmobiling and snowshoeing and ice climbing and so much more. Now, another thing that's important to keep in mind here in winter is that ultimately everything will freeze. Whether it's your car door or your trash can or any other things like that, if there's moisture involved and it gets cold, it's gonna freeze. And that can actually include your gas tank as well. So it's best to keep your gas tank no lower than a quarter tank in order to prevent that from happening. And as I said before, the weather can be so unpredictable. The forecast around here is oftentimes more of a suggestion. Just today, as I said a little while ago, we've seen everything from sunshine that we've got right now to rain, grapple, and snow. It can be 75 in November and it could snow in July. So take those snow forecasts with a grain of salt and be prepared for anything. You can also check out my video all about winter and the important things to know about surviving winter here in Montana as well, if you want to learn more about that specifically. Now, as far as summers here in Montana, they can be absolutely beautiful. They can get a little bit dry and a little bit hot, especially in those later summer months. You'll see the occasional afternoon thunderstorm roll through. It can be pretty predictable at times, even during those late summer months, but they don't often bring very much moisture. So when you get a thunderstorm rolling through with all that lightning and it doesn't bring very much rain with it, with all that dry timber, that can really up the risk for those late summer wildfires and forest fires, which can in turn affect the air quality around here. Sometimes that smoke can settle into the valleys and can definitely cause issues for some people. If you're a gardener, the weather is definitely something to take into consideration there as well. The growing season is a little bit shorter, so you'll see people do tend to start things indoors, move them outside once the danger of frost has subsided. Now, hardier plants can obviously be started outside. It's going to depend on a lot of different things, but something to keep in mind. Now, the next category I want to cover is the cost of living here. Wages in Montana have long been below the national average, but up until recently, so was the cost of living, and that has definitely changed. It's now more expensive than half the other states in the country, and that's largely due to real estate costs. Like many other cities in the Mountain West, Bozeman experienced an explosion of growth between 2020 and 2022. As a result of that boom, the housing supply became an issue and prices went up. Some people were even priced out of the area and moved to other surrounding areas, causing those prices to rise as well, just not as much. Housing itself is about 50 to 60% higher here than the national average. The overall cost of living is said to be about 22% higher than the national average. So obviously there's other things that bring that back down to a little bit better level, but those housing costs definitely are a factor for many. It really comes down to the demand and the fact that there's just not enough inventory right now, and there hasn't been for some time. And while there is quite a bit of new construction all over the area here in Bozeman city limits, outside of Bozeman city limits, much like the neighborhood right behind me where you can see homes still being built, as well as some that were just recently finished early this year or late last year in 2023. The new construction really hasn't been able to keep up with the levels of demand. Now, while Bozeman may be a bustling town of about 55,000 people and growing, it is pretty rural once you get outside of Bozeman or some of the other little small towns nearby. It doesn't take very long before you find yourself on a dirt road heading towards the mountains and you feel like you're so far from downtown, even though you maybe have only been driving for 15 or 20 minutes, sometimes less. Now, of course, another factor to that is what the job market is like here. Being a bit of a tourist destination, there's quite a few service industry jobs, and those wages haven't necessarily kept up with that rising cost of housing. There are definitely a good amount of higher paying jobs in the area in tech and at the university, healthcare, or even some of the outdoor outfitters and things like that all over this valley. But it can be really difficult to strike the right balance between housing costs and income. And there are many people who live here in Bozeman now who will tell you it has changed quite a lot, and they're not necessarily wrong. Bozeman is on the map. Definitely mentioned it in several of my other videos. People have taken notice between that outdoor lifestyle, the college, and everything that this whole valley has to offer. And that growth has definitely created some challenges. Some of the things that local people do tend to complain about are the traffic, both on the roads and on the trails outside of town, the rising costs of things, and of course, some people will say there's been a bit of a culture shift. Bozemanites have always known to be, friendly and welcoming, and I still believe that to be true for the most part. But if you do go on social media and announce that you're planning to move here, you might be met with some kinds of negativity. Though I will say most of what you'll encounter is going to be largely due to the fact that the people who live here desperately want to protect this beautiful place. Typically, you're not going to have the mountains all to yourself. There's more and more people getting outside, enjoying the beautiful trails and everything all over the valley, in the mountains, the rivers, and everything. So if you're looking for some solitude out there, you may have to go a little farther off the beaten path. And of course, there are reasons that Bozeman is attracting people from all over. Things to do aren't limited just to the outdoors, but to name a few, we've of course got hiking and biking and camping, hunting, fishing, rock climbing, all the winter activities, the skiing and the snowboarding. And then with Yellowstone National Park just 90 minutes south and Glacier National Park just about 5 hours north, we're in an absolutely beautiful part of this gorgeous state. I always highly recommend you get outside, take a hike, take in the absolutely beautiful views all over this valley, and you'll quickly see why so many of the locals Absolutely love it here. And don't be afraid to get out there and take photos of these absolutely stunning views. Just don't expect the pictures to do those views any kind of real justice. And don't just do it for the gram. Many locals here do prefer less technology out there on the trails. And if you don't already have a dog living here, you may end up inspired to get one. On top of all the different trails and parks dedicated to dogs specifically, there's also stores, doggy daycares, and more all over the valley. And it won't be long before you run into a lab named Bridger or Madison. And when you do get out there on the trails, don't leave your bear spray in your car. On top of needing it potentially, especially if you're going out for a hike or anything like that, any kind of temperature fluctuations in your car could actually cause a bear spray explosion. So consider yourself warned and keep that bear spray with you. Of course, you've also got stuff going on up at Montana State University, like a variety of basketball, football, volleyball games, and all kinds of other events. Of course, all of that in addition to all of the, downtown shopping and dining, events, art walks, art festivals, the Museum of the Rockies, and the hot springs just on the edge of the west side of Bozeman. And of course, a plethora of different options for seeing live local or traveling musicians from places like the Elm with a smaller venue to larger venues like the Field House at Montana State University. And if you don't already like beer, you may end up being persuaded. Montana has the most breweries per capita in the country, and Bozeman has quite a lot of them. Personally, I love that it can be so easy to get out of town and go out into the mountains or get a little bit more solitude and find some adventure. Some do find it a bit challenging, however, that towns can be really far apart. It can be a lot of driving in this massive state with more cows than people. And while Bozeman has seen this massive growth, it's still considered a small town when you compare it to some of the larger cities in other states all over the country. And it's not all cowboys and horses. If you're not actually a cowboy, if you don't actually work on a ranch, there's no need to dress like one. You'll see far more outdoor gear and Patagonia than you will cowboy gear, despite what the show Yellowstone depicts. With about 2.5 cows per person in the state of Montana, you will see your fair share of farms and ranches, but that's not all you're gonna see. And that's gonna be far more prevalent outside of the larger cities and towns, out in the rural areas and countryside. Now, this also means that public transportation can be a bit of a challenge. Bozeman does have more than it ever used to, but that being said, a lot of that is going to be limited to certain routes in town, that sort of thing. So you will find that you're going to be better off having a private vehicle. And when you are driving, a general rule of thumb is to be courteous to all other drivers. Don't bring your road rage here, please. We ask for space behind us, and we'll give you that space too, especially in winter. And if you're on one of those backcountry roads, be sure to wave, slow down, and be kind. And if you're not used to the road conditions or you're having a hard time with visibility, you can always pull over, slow down, find a pullout, find a turnout, or an area that it's safe to stop your vehicle so that you can go slower than the people behind you who might want to go faster, or just so that you can get your bearings or let maybe some of the worst of the storm pass by. And yes, it's true, Subarus, SUVs, and pickup trucks are everywhere. And yes, I drive a Subaru. There's a joke around here that the quickest way to clear out the lines in the community co-op is to go inside and announce that a Subi has its lights on in the parking lot. Though these days we are seeing a little bit more variety with some Teslas and Audis and other vehicles as well. Now, before we dive into the last couple of things that you need to know before moving to Bozeman here, as I said, my name is Hallie. I'm a born and raised Bozemanite, helping people to move, relocate, and simply find their place here in Bozeman and the surrounding areas here in Southwest Montana. My email and phone number are right here, or you can use the link in the description to learn a little bit more or get in touch that way, and I'd be happy to set up a one-on-one call and answer any questions you may have. I'm here to help you find the right place for you. I don't want you to end up in the wrong spot, so be sure to jot that information down and feel free to reach out. And if you haven't yet subscribed, I've always got new videos in the works. So if you want the best videos all about living here in and around Bozeman and the surrounding areas here all over Southwest Montana, subscribe. Education in the area here of Bozeman has always been pretty highly regarded, highly rated, from all those public schools to lots of private options. And then of course, Montana State University, which keeps breaking enrollment records year after year for the last, I think it's been 14 years now almost, that they have broken those records each year. MSU notably has remarkable programs in engineering and architecture, but also in education, nursing, and many more. Now, Montana has long been considered a red state, but there's probably more diversity than you might expect with the urban and rural divide and the differences in opinions and perspectives in towns and cities versus those rural areas. So while Montana is home to some of the best hunting in the country, not everyone is a gun-owning conservative. And not all of Montana is mountainous. So the eastern half of the state is mostly plains and hills and wide open spaces, and the western half of the state is where you're going to find that band of Rocky Mountains from the top of the state all the way down. Most of the time when people are moving to Montana, they are moving for that quality of life. It's true that it can be a paradise for those seeking more space, more community, a little bit more adventure, and of course access to the outdoors. But there are some things that make it less than easy to live here and to move here. Good paying jobs can be hard to find, and real estate, especially in some of the more highly desirable areas like Bozeman, can also be really hard to find or more expensive than you might expect. It's not all sunshine and horses. So it's not always easy to find your piece of Montana. Some people who move here want to find it all. They want river frontage, they want to be close to town, they want those spectacular, breathtaking views and wildlife, and maybe a horse property too. And while some of those properties do exist in the right areas, they're probably going to cost quite a bit more. They're quite simply few and far between. So what I often do is really get down to those priorities, try to get a better feel for what the most important factors are so that we can find the property that's the best fit for you. And for most of the people who do live here, just having access to the mountains, the rivers, the lakes, the ski hills, and everything else is all we really need. And of course, I've got plenty of other videos all about Bozeman, all about living in Belgrade and Manhattan and all the other towns here nearby if you're curious to learn more. And if you want to watch more right now, this is a playlist loaded with all of the best videos all about living in and around Bozeman, from vlog tours to pros and cons and more. And until next time, I hope to show you around town.